So, what if the absolute fastest way to secure your position in like a brutal, hyper-competitive corporate reorganization isn't to aggressively claw your way to the top?
Right. Which is what we're all sort of trained to do.
Exactly. But what if the secret is to actually intentionally aim for the lowest, most vulnerable position in the room?
I mean, it sounds completely backward.
It really does. But just think about that for a second, because, you listening to this right now, we are conditioned from birth to want the high ground.
Oh, absolutely. Always climb.
Always climb, right. You defend the high ground, you conquer the high ground. But today, we are taking a deep dive into a 2.5 millennia old document that basically claims our entire modern obsession with elevation, with status, and, fighting gravity is actually a mathematical recipe for profound weakness.
Yeah, it's a total paradigm shift.
It is. And I know you, our listener, you're someone who loves to learn and really analyze the systems operating beneath the surface of our culture. But you probably also feel occasionally overwhelmed by the modern grind.
Don't we all?
Right. So our mission today is to completely deconstruct the architecture of how you spend your energy. We are taking a single, remarkably dense source today.
Just one today, yeah.
Just one. It's chapter 8 of the Tao Te Ching. Specifically, we're using the wildly popular translation by Stephen Mitchell, and we're putting this thing under a microscope.
We really need to find out if this ancient blueprint for, I guess what we might call low-friction living, can actually survive contact with the real world.
Yeah, like can it survive a Tuesday morning staff meeting?
Right, or a brutal salary negotiation, or just a crisis at home. It really is the ultimate stress test for an ancient philosophy.
It really is.
And, before we dive into the specific tactical checklist that this chapter actually provides, we kind of need to establish some baseline definitions.
Yeah, let's do that. Why Mitchell's translation specifically?
Well, we're looking at Stephen Mitchell's version because he intentionally strips away all the heavy historical academic jargon.
Which is so helpful.
It is.
Yeah.
He translates the psychological core of the text into something a modern reader can, actually implement. He frames the entire chapter around this exploration of the supreme good.
The supreme good. That sounds very lofty.
It does, but what's cool is he doesn't define it as some esoteric divine state of enlightenment you achieve meditating on a mountaintop.
Right.
He defines it entirely through pragmatic daily behavior. It's a literal checklist.
Okay, let's unpack this. I actually want to read Mitchell's translation of chapter 8 in its entirety, right out of the gate.
Yeah, let's get the whole map in front of us.
Exactly. So bear with me. I'm just going to read it straight through.
Go for it.
Here is the text. The supreme good is like water, which nourishes all things without trying to. It is content with the low places that people disdain. Thus, it is like the Tao. In dwelling, live close to the ground. In thinking, keep to the simple. In conflict, be fair and generous.
Right.
In governing, don't try to control. In work, do what you enjoy. In family life, be completely present.
And here's the kicker.
Yeah, the end says, when you are content to be simply yourself and don't compare or compete, everybody will respect you.
I mean, it is an incredibly concentrated piece of writing. There's zero filler.
Zero. It's so dense.
And I want you to notice that pivotal phrase right in the third sentence. Thus it is like the Tao. We really can't talk about chapter 8 without understanding what the Tao fundamentally represents here.
Right, because it's the anchor for everything else. What does it actually mean?
So the Tao translates roughly to the way or the path. But philosophically, it refers to the underlying natural order of the universe.
Like the physics of reality.
Exactly. It's the fundamental operating system. The text is arguing that when you fight against the Tao, when you try to force outcomes or manipulate people or artificially inflate your status, you are essentially trying to swim upstream.
Against the current of the universe.
Right. You generate massive amounts of friction, you burn energy, you just completely exhaust yourself.
And the text uses water as the ultimate physical manifestation of that operating system. It says water is content with the low places that people disdain.
Yeah, the low places.
Let's stop right there, because this is where my modern hyper-capitalist programming starts flashing bright red warning lights.
I bet. It's jarring.
It is,
Okay.
because if we're applying this to a 21st century career, the low places are exactly what we are desperately trying to escape.
Nobody wants to be at the bottom of the org chart.
No one. I mean, if you are fighting for a sliver of equity in a Series B startup, or, you're trying to get your kid into a really competitive public school district, you cannot afford to be content with the low places.
It feels like failure.
It does. Flowing down sounds literally indistinguishable from just giving up.
What's fascinating here is how the text demands a total inversion of our understanding of structural integrity.
How so?
Well, we naturally equate high with power and low with vulnerability. But let's look at the actual physics of water. Water is entirely devoid of ego. It always submits to gravity.
Right, it never fights it.
Never. It seeks the lowest possible point in any given environment. It flows down into the cracks, the valleys, the dark places nobody else is fighting over.
Because nobody wants them.
Exactly. But what happens when water occupies the lowest place? It gathers, it pools, it accumulates mass and density and incredible weight.
Oh, wow.
Think about it. The Grand Canyon wasn't carved by a static mountain peak. It was carved by the Colorado River, relentlessly occupying the absolute lowest point it could possibly find.
So the power comes from the accumulation, not the elevation.
Precisely. When you aggressively seek the high places,
Yeah.
the prestigious titles, the visible accolades, the VIP status, you put yourself in a highly precarious, high-friction environment.
Because everyone else wants that spot.
Right. You are constantly exposed. You have to expend massive amounts of daily caloric energy just to defend your high ground from everyone else trying to knock you off your pedestal.
It's just an exhausting defense mechanism.
It really is.
Yeah.
But if you intentionally occupy the lowest place, meaning you operate from a foundation of service, quiet competence, and radical humility, you literally cannot be knocked down any further.
You bypass the structural vulnerability of the ego entirely.
You remove the target from your back.
You really do.
Yeah.
If we translate that to a standard corporate environment, the person fighting for the high ground is the one dominating the meeting.
Oh yeah, constantly interrupting.
Constantly interrupting, claiming credit for every little thing, making sure everyone in the room knows exactly how crucial they are. They are a massive neon target.
Everyone wants them to fail.
Exactly. But the water-like person is the one quietly asking the clarifying questions. They take the unglamorous tasks, they ensure the actual infrastructure of the project works.
They're down in the plumbing.
Right, they are in the low place. But paradoxically, they become the most indispensable person in the room. If they leave, the whole thing falls apart, they hold it together.
And that leads perfectly into the second half of that core metaphor. The text says, water nourishes all things without trying to.
Without trying to. That's tough.
That phrase is deeply disruptive because modern professional culture is built entirely on the concept of trying.
It's like trying incredibly hard.
Yes, the entire framework of hustle culture or strategic networking is about applying maximum force to yield a very specific return on investment.
Right. You go to an industry conference with an optimized elevator pitch.
Exactly. You target the 3 specific venture capitalists you researched on LinkedIn the night before, and you try to force a connection that will magically accelerate your career.
It's the friction of the hustle, and honestly, it usually feels incredibly artificial when you're doing it.
Because it is artificial. Contrast that modern mechanism of force with the Taoist mechanism of flow. Water doesn't wake up and construct a strategic 5-year plan to nourish a specific oak tree.
Just to maximize the tree's acorn output for Q3.
Exactly. Water simply flows according to its fundamental nature. It moves through the soil, and in the sheer, uncalculated process of being itself, it aligns with the roots of the tree.
So the nourishment is just a natural byproduct of its presence. It's not the result of a forced agenda.
Right.
Okay, but applying nourishing without trying to our actual literal lives means abandoning the strategic agenda entirely? That feels incredibly risky.
I know it does.
I mean, if I don't actively try to build my network, how do I ever advance? How do I get the job?
Well, it means changing the mechanism of your actions from extraction to alignment.
Extraction to alignment. Unpack that.
When you operate with a forced extraction-based agenda, like, I need this person to like me so I get the promotion, people subconsciously sense that friction.
Oh, absolutely. You can always tell when someone is networking at you.
Right. They feel managed. They feel targeted. But when you operate like water, your focus shifts entirely to your immediate environment.
You just focus on the work?
You do excellent work. You support your colleagues. You solve the actual problem right in front of you. And you do it not because you're playing 4D chess with your career trajectory, but because that is your natural state of being.
And people notice that.
You become undeniably valuable. And ironically, that genuine, agendaless alignment naturally attracts the exact kind of high-level opportunities you were previously exhausting yourself trying to force.
Wow. We are essentially talking about the physics of human interaction here. Force creates resistance. Flow absorbs resistance.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so we've established this quiet water-like baseline, but the text doesn't let us just philosophize abstractly about rivers forever. It immediately takes this massive cosmic concept and drops it right into our living rooms.
Yeah, the checklist begins.
The checklist. The text says, in dwelling, live close to the ground. In thinking, keep to the simple.
It brings the macro immediately into the micro. It's saying the architecture of a balanced life has to start with the literal physical space you occupy and the internal space of your own mind.
Okay, let's challenge the physical space first. In dwelling, live close to the ground. Now, living close to the ground sounds very serene if you were a hermit living in the woods.
Sure.
But let's talk about the friction of modern economics. How do you dwell in the low places when homeownership, square footage, and zip codes literally dictate the quality of the public school your kids get to attend?
It's a very real pressure.
It is. The high ground in real estate isn't just about ego. Sometimes it's about basic survival and providing a safe future for your family. If the whole system is built on vertical climbing, isn't refusing to climb just negligence?
It's a vital distinction to make because you're right. The text is not advocating for asceticism or, punishing yourself with poverty.
Okay, good.
Dwell close to the ground is a psychological directive applied to physical space. It addresses the motivation behind your architecture. Yes, you need a safe neighborhood. Yes, you want good schools.
Right.
But how much of modern dwelling extends far beyond functional necessity and crosses into simply projecting status?
A lot of it. Probably most of it.
The friction begins when you purchase the house that stretches your debt-to-income ratio to its absolute breaking point, solely because of the prestige of the address.
Or keeping up with the neighbors.
Exactly. The friction is buying the luxury vehicle that causes you low-grade anxiety every single time you park it in a public lot because you are just terrified of a scratch.
It's the hedonic treadmill materialized as a 30-year mortgage.
That's exactly what it is. Maintaining all of those status symbols requires a staggering amount of forced ongoing energy. You are trapped maintaining a complex facade for an imaginary audience.
An audience that probably isn't even paying attention.
They usually aren't. So living close to the ground means engineering a physical environment that supports your actual, authentic daily reality, not an idealized version of your life meant for public consumption.
It means finding profound comfort in what is functional, secure, and easily maintained.
Right. When your dwelling is truly grounded, it acts as a sanctuary from friction, rather than just another source of it.
And if your physical space is grounded, you actually have the bandwidth to tackle the internal space. Because the text pairs dwelling directly with the mind. It says, in thinking, keep to the simple.
This is a huge one.
It is, and this is another line that feels incredibly counterintuitive for you, the listener, today. We live in a deeply complex knowledge economy. We are literally paid salaries to execute complex problem solving.
Right. Simplicity sounds like a demotion.
Exactly. If I am managing a global supply chain or I'm writing algorithmic code, my thinking cannot be simple. If you aren't analyzing the data from 8 different angles and anticipating 10 steps ahead, you are obsolete.
This is perhaps the most misunderstood concept in Taoist philosophy when it gets applied to the modern West. We constantly conflate simple with simplistic or unintelligent.
So what does it actually mean?
The source material is not telling you to ignore complex data. It is explicitly warning against the psychological habit of over-intellectualizing reality. Simple thinking, in this context, is the rigorous application of Occam's razor to your daily anxieties.
Oh, to your anxieties, not your spreadsheets.
Exactly. It is about cutting through mental clutter.
I want to look at the actual mechanism of that mental clutter. What does over-intellectualizing actually look like in a standard workday?
Let's look at a hyper-specific, very modern scenario. The paranoid Slack message.
Oh, no. I know exactly where this is going.
Right. You get a message from your director at 10 a.m. that just says, hey, let's chat about your Q3 numbers at 4 p.m.
My heart rate just spiked, honestly.
See? A complex thinker, someone operating with high internal friction, immediately spirals. They spend the next 4 hours analyzing the punctuation of that single sentence.
Why was there no exclamation point? They always use exclamation points.
Exactly. They run these complex paranoid decision trees in their head. Are they mad about the Johnson account? Is this a precursor to a layoff? Who else is invited to this meeting?
Your cortisol is just flooding your system.
Yes. Your heart rate elevates, your stress spikes, and your actual productive work for the rest of the day grinds to a complete halt. because your consciousness is entirely occupied by a simulated catastrophe that doesn't actually exist.
You are fighting a phantom current. You've essentially generated a massive Category 5 storm in a glass of water.
Beautifully put.
Mm.
Now, the simple thinker, the water-like thinker, receives the exact same Slack message and processes only the objective reality.
Which is just that the director wants to review Q3 numbers at 4 p.m.
That's it. The simple thinker gathers the Q3 data, prepares a clear summary, and goes right back to their current task. Simple thinking is the ruthless elimination of hypothetical scenarios.
It is stripping away the ego's demand to predict and control the future and dealing strictly with the reality immediately in front of you.
Right. It is a highly sophisticated, highly efficient cognitive state.
It's cognitive efficiency. You are preserving the cycles of your processor for actual problems rather than simulated ones. Okay, so we have engineered our homes for function over status, and we have disciplined our minds to stop spiraling into paranoia. We have this quiet, rounded baseline.
But we don't live in isolation.
Right. The text next forces us to look outward, to where we spend the vast majority of our waking conscious hours, our careers and our families.
This is where Mitchell's translation of the text becomes piercingly relevant to our modern lives. It mandates two very distinct boundaries. In work, do what you enjoy. In family life, be completely present.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. Let's look at that second mandate first. In family life, be completely present. When I was prepping for this and reading the source material, I literally had to stop and reread it.
It jumps out at you.
It does, because this document was written hundreds of years before the Roman Empire even existed, yet it flawlessly diagnoses the exact psychological mechanism of modern smartphone addiction.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals a deeply uncomfortable truth about human nature. The tools have changed, obviously, but our struggle with fragmented attention has always been our Achilles heel.
The smartphone is the ultimate engine of high-friction living because it literally forces your consciousness to continuously occupy the high ground of multiple simulated realities at once.
You're splitting yourself into fractions.
You are physically sitting on the rug playing blocks with your toddler, but your consciousness is fighting a political battle on Twitter, responding to a frantic client email, and absorbing a push notification about a global crisis. You are nowhere.
You are absent. And why is family life explicitly called out as the arena requiring radical presence? Because the family unit is generally the only place where we feel secure enough to completely disengage.
Oh, that hurts. But it's true.
Think about the friction of an average workday. You use your absolute A-game focus to navigate office politics, manage client expectations, and perform your professional persona. You force it all day long.
And then you commute home.
And when you finally walk through your front door, the friction ends, and the exhaustion just hits you like a wall. You collapse. You give the people you supposedly love the most the absolute dregs of your cognitive bandwidth.
We default to the scrolling. We use the phone as a literal anesthetic to numb out.
Yes, we do. And the text is demanding radical presence as the antidote to that. It is asking you to bring that deep, nourishing, water-like attention to the immediate physical reality of your loved ones.
Radical presence isn't just about being polite and, putting the phone in a drawer during dinner.
No, it's much deeper than that. It's about collapsing your fragmented consciousness back into a single, defensible, low place. When you are truly completely present with someone, you are fulfilling that earlier metaphor we talked about. You are nourishing them without trying.
You aren't offering brilliant advice or fixing their life. You are just offering the profound, stabilizing gift of your unbroken reality.
Exactly. Just your full attention.
It takes an immense amount of intentionality to sustain that, especially now. But let's pivot to the other side of this outward energy, which is our jobs. The text says, in work, do what you enjoy.
Right.
Again, I have to play the skeptic for the listener here. This sounds like a privileged platitude.
It does sound like something on a throw pillow.
Right. Do what you enjoy is fine if you want to be an amateur poet and you have a massive trust fund. But what about the person working a brutal third-shift logistics job to pay off crushing medical debt?
It's a very fair point.
How does this ancient text apply to someone who simply does not have the luxury of quitting to follow their bliss?
It is a critical pushback. The modern interpretation of do what you enjoy has been hijacked by a sort of toxic positivity.
Oh, definitely. Good vibes only.
Right. The Tao is not telling you to turn your weekend hobby into a monetized side hustle. It is pointing to the concept of wu wei, which translates roughly to effortless action.
Effortless action.
Yes. It is about aligning your daily labor with your natural intrinsic capabilities, rather than forcing yourself into a shape that violently violates your nature, simply for the sake of prestige or external expectations.
Break down the actual mechanics of effortless action in a corporate setting. What is the difference between a natural capability and a forced shape?
Let's use the water metaphor again. Water effortlessly flows through the channels that gravity dictates. It doesn't try to flow uphill.
Right.
So let's say you are an incredibly empathetic, highly sensitive person who naturally thrives in deep one-on-one connections. But because you want a high salary and a prestigious title, you force yourself to become a high-stakes corporate litigator.
Oh, man.
You spend every single day operating in a combative, aggressive, zero-sum environment. Every morning you have to put on psychological armor just to go to work. You are swimming upstream.
The friction would be catastrophic.
It is. You will burn out, you'll become deeply cynical, and your physical health will likely deteriorate.
Because the environment demands a mechanism you just don't naturally possess.
Exactly. Doing what you enjoy, in the Taoist sense, means identifying your natural channel, whether that is organizing chaotic data, mentoring junior staff, fixing complex physical machinery, or writing really clear prose.
Finding what you're naturally built for.
And finding a way to provide value through that specific channel. If you align your work with your natural flow, the daily execution of your tasks generates significantly less psychological friction.
So it's fundamentally an efficiency metric. The person operating in their natural flow can sustain their effort for decades without burning out, whereas the person forcing in a natural persona will eventually just fracture under the pressure.
Absolutely.
Okay. We have simplified the home, we've cleared the paranoid mental spirals, we put the phones away to achieve radical presence, and we aligned our careers with our natural flow. It sounds utterly utopian.
Well, life isn't a utopia.
It's not. Here is where the rubber really meets the road. You can be as grounded and water-like as humanly possible, but eventually, someone is going to throw a massive boulder right into your river.
They always do.
You cannot control other people. You will face conflict. You'll face aggressive, totally unreasonable individuals. How does a philosophy built on flowing to the low places survive an actual bare-knuckle fight?
This is the exact moment where the philosophy proves whether it is just a nice aesthetic or a highly durable operating system.
Let's test it.
The text addresses the inevitable collision with the external world head-on. It gives us two highly specific directives. In conflict, be fair and generous. In governing, don't try to control.
Okay, let's tackle governing first. Because don't try to control is a terrifying directive for anyone who has ever managed a team, run a business, or honestly, parented a toddler.
It sounds like a recipe for chaos.
Isn't control the literal definitional requirement of leadership? I mean, if I'm a project manager and I don't control the deliverables, the entire software launch fails, the company loses millions, and I get fired. How on earth do you govern without controlling?
Think about the software development lifecycle you just mentioned. The friction of bad management almost always stems from the illusion of absolute control. Yes. The micromanager is operating from a place of deep, unresolved anxiety. They demand to be CC'd on every single email. They rewrite their team's code at 2 a.m. They dictate exactly how a problem must be solved. What is the actual mechanical result of that control?
Well, the team completely shuts down.
Exactly.
They stop taking any initiative because they know their work is just going to be overridden anyway. You create massive bottlenecks, resentment builds up, and the project actually slows down to a crawl.
Precisely. Forced control kills momentum. Now look at the water-like leader. The text says water nourishes without trying. The effective leader views governing as cultivating an ecosystem, not operating a puppet show.
Cultivating an ecosystem.
Right. They set the boundary conditions, the vision, the deadlines, the resources, and then they step out of the way. They trust the natural inclinations of their highly skilled team. They focus on removing obstacles rather than dictating micro-movements.
It requires a profound amount of internal security to lead this way.
It does. Because you have to completely dismantle your ego's demand to be the hero of the project.
You have to be completely okay with the project succeeding in a way you didn't specifically orchestrate.
Which is very hard for high achievers.
It's incredibly hard. That makes sense for leadership, though. But what about direct malicious conflict?
The attacks.
Yes. The text says, in conflict, be fair and generous. If someone in that Tuesday staff meeting actively attacks your character, throws you under the bus to save themselves, and tries to blatantly steal credit for your work, being fair and generous sounds like a strategic disaster.
It sounds like capitulation.
It sounds like you are just volunteering to be a doormat.
It sounds like weakness to a culture addicted to retaliation. But let's deeply analyze the psychological geometry of a conflict. We need to go back to the very first principle of chapter, the power of the low places.
Okay, grounding ourselves again.
When you operate from the lowest place, the source implies you become entirely unreachable by ego-driven conflict.
Unreachable. Walk me through the actual mechanics of becoming unreachable when someone is actively screaming at you across a conference table.
Almost all professional and personal conflicts are not actually about the objective issue being debated. They are about two egos fighting for dominance.
It's a power struggle.
It is a game of tug-of-war. Person A feels insecure, so they attack person B to establish dominance, to seize the high ground. The attack is entirely dependent on person B picking up their end of the rope and pulling back.
They need the resistance.
Person A needs your defensive reaction to fuel their aggression. They need you to match their kinetic energy.
So what happens if you just refuse to pick up the rope?
If you respond to an aggressive, ego-driven attack with absolute fairness, meaning you remain coldly objective, you actually acknowledge any valid points they might have, and you trip all the emotion out of the room, and you respond with generosity, meaning you refuse to attack them personally. In return, you completely short-circuit the physics of the conflict.
You literally turn into water. Think about it. If you punch a solid brick wall, you shatter your knuckles. But if you punch a body of water, the water simply parts around the fist. It absorbs the kinetic energy without taking any damage, and then it immediately flows right back into its original shape.
The water doesn't get bruised.
The fist just gets tired.
That is an exceptional visualization of the concept. It is a form of emotional aikido. By refusing to engage in the ego battle, you remain fundamentally untouched by it.
The aggressor is trying to knock you off your pedestal, but because you are already intentionally occupying the low place of humility, there's nowhere for you to fall.
You deny them the friction they need to sustain their attack. And practically speaking, when you meet aggression with calm, generous objectivity, the aggressor is left swinging wildly at the air.
They look ridiculous.
They do. They usually end up exposing their own irrationality and insecurity to everyone else in the room. It is a highly superior defense mechanism disguised as pacifism.
It's weaponized humility. I absolutely love that. And this non-combative, entirely frictionless approach to the external world perfectly sets up the text's final, ultimate thesis.
The secret sauce.
Exactly. This is where Mitchell's translation delivers the final blow to our modern anxieties. We've optimized our physical space, our mental bandwidth, our family presence, our workflow, and our conflict resolution. Now, the text deals with the ultimate currency of the modern world, how everyone else perceives you.
The climax of the chapter.
Let me read those final lines again. When you are content to be simply yourself and don't compare or compete, everybody will respect you.
Such a powerful statement.
So what does this all mean in the era of the algorithm? The text says don't compare or compete, but we live in a society that is structurally engineered for omnipresent comparison.
You let that unavoidable now.
We walk around with glass rectangles in our pockets that quantify our exact social worth in real time. We can see the exact metrics of our peers' tropical vacations. We can search the exact salary bands of our colleagues. We can see exactly who got promoted faster than us on LinkedIn.
The invisible metrics of status are now hyper-visible.
They are constantly in our faces. How do you possibly stop comparing yourself when the competition is broadcast to you 24/7?
This raises an important question, and it highlights what I consider the most radical paradox in the entire chapter, the paradox of respect.
Okay, tell me about the paradox.
Our culture operates on a zero-sum fallacy regarding respect. We are conditioned to believe that respect is a finite resource, and the only way to earn it is to conquer someone else.
You have to beat them to earn it.
Right. We believe we must have the sharpest arguments, the most followers, the highest revenue, and the most aggressive posturing to command respect. We think respect is the prize for winning the competition.
The winner takes all, and the loser is just invisible.
But the Tao completely obliterates that framework. The source argues that fighting for respect actually breeds resentment, isolation, and endless friction.
It's counterproductive.
Think about the people in your own life, the mentors, the leaders, the friends that you possess the deepest, most unshakable respect for. Are they the people who are constantly checking their metrics, constantly humble bragging on LinkedIn, constantly trying to verbally one-up you in every conversation?
Never. The people I genuinely respect the most are the ones who are almost eerily comfortable in their own skin.
Yes?
They have this quiet gravitational pull. You want to be in their orbit because they don't emit any of that anxious, competitive radiation.
Eerily comfortable in their own skin. That is the exact manifestation of being content to simply be yourself. When you stop competing, you fundamentally cease to be a threat to the egos of the people around you.
Oh,
I
wow.
want to repeat that because it is the secret sauce of the entire philosophy.
Yeah.
When you stop competing, you cease to be a threat.
Because you aren't trying to take anything from them.
Right. If you're constantly trying to prove your superiority, you force everyone around you into a defensive posture. But when you accept your own nature, when you are content in your own low place, you allow the people around you to finally exhale.
Because they realize you aren't trying to steal their high ground, you aren't playing the game, so they don't have to defend themselves against you.
Right. And in that relaxed, frictionless environment, genuine respect naturally flourishes. The text suggests that stepping off the treadmill of comparison is the only way to become a person of true substance.
A person of substance.
A person of substance doesn't require a dashboard of external metrics to validate their existence. Their authenticity is unquestionable because it isn't performative.
I want to make sure this doesn't just sound like a beautifully written platitude, because there is real, tangible risk here for the listener. Let's debate the harsh practicality of this for a second.
Let's do it.
Someone listening right now is thinking, look, this sounds deeply peaceful, but if I stop competing at work, my aggressive colleague gets the promotion instead of me. If I don't get the promotion, I don't get the bonus, and I can't pay for my kids' college tuition. I cannot afford to just be a puddle of tranquil water while everyone else is climbing the mountain.
It is the ultimate critique of Eastern philosophy colliding with Western capitalism. But we have to return to the physics of water we established at the very beginning.
Remind us.
Water is not passive. It is not weak. It carved the Grand Canyon. It is persistent, heavy, and totally unstoppable. Not competing does not mean not acting.
Okay, that's a crucial distinction.
It does not mean abandoning excellence or becoming lazy. It means fundamentally changing the internal motivation behind your action.
It's the shift from force to flow.
Exactly. You can execute your job with absolute brilliance. You can be highly innovative, insanely productive, and deeply impactful. But you do it because you are aligned with your natural flow, because you find intrinsic value in solving the problem, and because you want to nourish the ecosystem of your team.
You do it from a place of wu-wei, effortless action.
Right. The external output might look identical to the person who is furiously, anxiously competing for the promotion, but the internal psychological experience is night and day.
And over a 20-year career horizon, the person operating through flow is going to vastly outlast the person operating through force.
Without a doubt.
The competitive, force-driven person is burning rocket fuel. They will inevitably flame out, suffer health issues, or completely destroy the relationship.
It's not sustainable.
But the flow-driven person is running on solar power. They just keep going, quietly accumulating mass and respect. Abandoning competition isn't about abandoning your ambition. It's about abandoning the agonizing anxiety of comparison. You strive to do incredible work, but your gaze remains internal. You stop frantically darting your eyes sideways to see what the person in the next cubicle is doing.
When you are content to simply be yourself, your bandwidth is no longer hijacked by the need to defend your ego against a perceived rival. You reclaim all of that wasted cognitive energy and apply it directly to your actual life.
I want you, the listener, to just close your eyes for a second and actually imagine that. Imagine the sheer, visceral, physical relief of completely dropping the need to compete with your peers.
It's huge.
Just setting that massively heavy, exhausting bag down on the floor and walking away from it. Imagine replacing all of that low-grade anxiety, all of that sideways glancing, all of that toxic metric checking with the radically simple, deeply grounded goal of just being authentic.
Just being yourself.
Of doing your work well, being fiercely present with your family, and letting the external chips fall wherever they may. It feels like taking the first full, deep breath you've had in years.
It is the ultimate definition of low-friction living.
It really is. Let's synthesize this entire deconstruction. We started by looking at the exhausting, high-friction treadmill of modern life, the constant, frantic swimming upstream against the current.
The hustle.
Right. And Stephen Mitchell's translation of Chapter 8 of the Tao Te Ching has provided us with a terrifyingly accurate, step-by-step psychological diagnostic tool for shifting from that destructive mindset of force to a sustainable mindset of flow.
A literal checklist.
We talked about the physical space, stripping away the exhausting facade of status symbols and finding the deep security of living close to the functional ground.
The micro and the macro.
We talked about the internal space, ruthlessly eliminating the complex, paranoid, simulated catastrophes in our minds and keeping our thinking fiercely simple and anchored in reality.
No more phantom currents.
We looked at the profound friction of the smartphone and the radical, almost rebellious necessity of collapsing our fragmented consciousness back into unbroken presence with our families.
Radical presence.
We explored the efficiency of aligning our daily labor with our natural channels, rather than forcing ourselves into agonizing, prestigious molds.
Wu-wei.
We broke down the mechanics of emotional Aikido, how to absorb kinetic aggression by being fair and generous, thereby abandoning the ego's high ground and becoming entirely unreachable by conflict.
Punching water instead of a brick wall.
And finally, we discussed the ultimate paradox. How completely stepping off the competitive battlefield and abandoning the metrics of comparison is the only mathematical way to generate genuine, lasting respect.
It is a staggering achievement in psychological observation, compressed into just a few lines of poetry. And the final point I would make to the listener is a reminder of the sheer durability of this text.
Yeah, talk about that.
This wisdom has survived 2.5 millennia. It was written in a world lit by fire. It survived the rise and fall of global empires, the Industrial Revolution, and it maps perfectly onto the dawn of the algorithmic internet.
Which is mind-blowing.
It has survived because the core architecture of human nature, our deep-seated terror of vulnerability, our exhausting desire for control, our tragic tendency to force outcomes rather than align with reality that hasn't changed one iota.
We just have faster, shinier tools to distract ourselves with now.
Exactly. The path to the supreme good, the mechanism for a low-friction life, was exactly the same then as it is right now. You have to stop fighting the current. You have to be like water.
You have to be like water. What a profound place to land. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, our listener, with one final, highly specific question drawn directly from the mechanics of this text to carry with you into the rest of your day.
Give it to them.
I want you to think about that opening image, the feeling of aggressively fighting gravity, fighting the current of your own life. Look at the specific calendar invites, the family obligations, the difficult conversations waiting for you this afternoon. Look at them closely.
Really look at them.
Now ask yourself, does the idea of intentionally not trying to control the outcome of those events, of simply flowing into those spaces, providing your natural nourishment, and being content with wherever gravity takes you, does that idea feel like it would make your day infinitely easier or infinitely more terrifying?
That is the question.
Let that question sit with you. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you next time.